We're going to be in Luke 11. 37 is where we're going to start as we continue down here. Once again, it's in Luke, so obviously people are sitting down and they are eating. Good. They're all eating. So 37 just through 41 for now. When Jesus had finished speaking, a Pharisee invited him to eat with him. So he went and reclined at the table. But the Pharisee was surprised when he noticed that Jesus did not wash before the meal. Then the Lord said to him, "Now then, you Pharisees clean the outside of the cup and the dish, but on the inside are full of greed and wickedness. You foolish people, did not the one who made the outside also make the inside? But now, as for what's inside of you, be generous to the poor, and everything will be clean for you." I don't know about you, but when people go to the bathroom, and you're in like a public bathroom, and they come out of the stall, and they go right for the door, and they're wearing a like server's uniform at the restaurant you're eating at, like just make it awful in your brain. Like you're kind of grossed out, right? Like who does that? It's not hard to turn on the thing, especially it's all automatic now. You don't even have to touch anything. It's really easy to wash your hands. It grosses me out. But that's not exactly what surprised the Pharisees here, because I don't think that people, in Jesus' day were like, there are microorganisms on your hands that you must wash off using antibacterial soap. This is something else going on here, even though, right, we're still with it. This is about ceremonial cleanliness. So I don't know if I follow them on Instagram. I can't think of their name, but they're both Hasidic Jews, and they talk about all the different things they do, like when they go into an Airbnb, how they have to kosherize the microwave and kosherize the countertops and what that looks like. And so that's his demonstration of the ceremonial washing. And so this is what they're talking about, the ceremonial cleanliness. The Pharisees and all the Jews do not eat in this time frame unless they give their hands the ceremonial washing before the bread. And so they hold on to these traditions that have been passed on. So when they come from the marketplace, too, they don't eat unless they wash. And they observe so many of these traditions, such as washing cups, pitchers, and kettles. I actually had another video of them talking about when they buy new pots and pans to cook with, they actually have to go do a ceremonial washing with it. And so it's him walking out to a lake with their brand new cookware, and he has to dip it in, and they wash it and say a prayer over it. This is all part of this continuing ritual. This happens with all these different things. And so in most homes, when Jesus would have entered this Pharisee's home, there would be a station set up with stone jars with the water in it so that they could draw it and pour it over their hands for the ceremonial cleaning. And so they developed this ritual over 500 years of this law being given to them. But here, it's like Jesus just waltzes out of the bathroom, right, just for our own connotation here, and he sits down and he grabs the toast and the butter and starts going for it. And they're like, "Excuse me, what have you done?" You get the same visceral reaction now. It's like watching someone leave the bathroom, and then your server, walks over. There's a Curb Your Enthusiasm episode. This is I think the best connotation now that I'm thinking of it, because it just came to me. Anyone watch this show, Curb Your Enthusiasm? There's an episode where they usually eat at a restaurant, but their waitress is sick, has the stomach flu, and so they go to a different restaurant on a different floor, because they hear that she's sick, but she's serving that table, and the whole thing is she has sweat dripping down into their soup. It's disgusting. But this is this visceral reaction. It's like your server has just thrown up in the bathroom, and they're handing you bread. This is what Jesus does. He waltzes in past all of it, skips the ceremonial washing. He's ritually unclean and starts eating in front of the Pharisee. And they're like, "Are you with me? We good? Okay." But as we hear, Jesus points to the mugs and the plates that are set up for this, and he essentially says this to them. He says, "Could you imagine you pick this up and you wash the outside of it, but you never clean the inside?" That would be like putting your coffee mug and you put your coffee in it, and then you finish drinking and you wash the outside of it and just set it down with the remnants of your coffee still in the bottom, and you leave it in the car maybe, and then when you finally bring it in to scrub away the inside, or scrub it away till it's squeaky clean, and then you pour coffee back on the inside of the cup where the old coffee still is, and you got some coagulated cream that's floated at the top, and you finish that, and then when you look down, the thing is looking back up at you from the inside of the cup. You with me? Just don't ever touch the inside. This is what he's saying. You wash the outside, but there's curdled milk floating in the middle of this mug. I don't know if you've put this together. The Pharisees are not surprised that, are very surprised that Jesus doesn't do this ceremonial cleansing before eating, but he doesn't really care about this extra biblical tradition from the Talmud. He sees it for what it is. This is what he's calling out. It's this man-made ceremony meant to make you feel like you're more acceptable, but that's not exactly what makes someone acceptable. He's like, you're washing the outside of the cup, but on the inside, it's still disgusting. You haven't really done anything with it. Right? The outside looks really good. You clean it, and it's great. I remember my mom one time asked me, when I was living in a dorm room in college, she said, how often do you wash your bed sheets? And I said, I'll let you know when I do it the first time. Now, that was like spring semester. I'm just kidding. But you know what I mean? Like, Jenny, my sister, once they said, how often do you wash your jeans? And she goes, till they can lean up in the corner, right? So it's the same thing with, like, we would make ramen noodles in the microwave, and we'd, like, rinse it off in the, like, drinking fountain, because that's what we had, and then we'd just throw the bowl. And by the end of the year, Colin and I had, like, little animals growing in our bowls at the end. This is what's happening. The outside might look great, but the inside, it's not good. If you want to be really clean, it's got to start scrubbing down on the inside where the greed and the wickedness grows. This is what Jesus tells them. There's more going on the inside than on the outside. This is where real cleanliness begins. That something goes wrong inside of someone's heart. That they're full of this greed and wickedness, as he says. And he speaks then to the Pharisees at this moment, 6 woes against the Pharisees. You got to go, whoa. Now, like you're Keanu Reeves in The Matrix, you go, whoa. Like that. Come on, humor me. Whoa. There it is, perfect. They're judgments. They're a curse, but also a revelation. They reveal what's going on the inside. So he speaks these 6 ones against them to kind of open up their eyes. There's sort of 6 heart changes that should happen. So he cries these out to the Pharisees, and we often think of Pharisees as, whatever, these high and mighty, whatever. They really were. They knew their law. They knew what was going on. They're not villains. They're not the bad guys. They're not evil. They're like me. It's like, if Jesus walked in here and he started cursing the Pharisees, he'd be cursing someone who's gone through school, has the education, thinks they know what's right, and he's correcting that behavior. So they're not the villains, but they're also just lay people sometimes. So people who wanted to serve in the temple would go through the schooling. So this is not just a woe against people who are professionals. These are the people who are involved in the temple time. So this is really woes to anyone who would consider themselves a part of the church proper. These heart problems. So we're going to get our warning signs. Here's our first one, 11:42. Woe to you, Pharisees, because you give 1/10 of your mint, rue, and all other kinds of garden herbs, but you neglect justice and the love of God. You should have practiced the latter without leaving the former undone. My summary for this one in normal person English is this. I'll say it, repeat it after me. Love of religion over the love of God and neighbor. So love of religion over the love of God and neighbor. Someone who loves being religious, who loves doing the motions. They go to the spots they're supposed to be. They put the plate goes by. They drop their money into it. They stand and they sing the songs. They listen to the sermon. Maybe they even go on Facebook and they like and share and comment to spread they do all the right things. But at the same time, this same person who's being religious might yell and scream at coworkers, might treat people poorly the next day. They don't go to church because they love Jesus. They love tradition. They love the things that happen there. It makes them, it's comfortable. They've been doing it a long time, and I like routine, and this is just what we do. You with me? This is the first one. Jesus says to these Pharisees that they're being very careful to give. He doesn't even get on to them about the fact that they give. But there's this precision in their tithing and these regulations that they have. Mosaic law never commanded the tithing of little garden herbs and kitchen spices. It's like doesn't exist, but they do it. But they're so careful to check off all these boxes. So they pick their mint leaves and they pull off, 10 leaves. They go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And this one is for the temple. And then they get their, what's the other one he uses? The dill. They get the dill seeds, and they put the 10 dill seeds, and then the 10th dill seed, this one's for the temple. Do you see they're making sure they're checking all the right boxes, how dedicated you need to be, right? But about the greater things, what he gets to them, like the justice for the oppressed. The heart that learns to love God, it's missed. That's the implication here. Checking off the boxes is easier than actually checking your heart towards and evaluating your way towards God. It's much easier to just pick off 10 leaves than it would be to actually change something about the way that you encounter the divine. As I'm going to say through this often, it's much easier to be a hypocrite than it is to follow God. It's much easier. You can focus on all the little deeds, you can check them off, another perfect score, another spiritual A+, I did this test, I gave some money in the offering plate, and you're becoming a better and better and better hypocrite over and over, focusing on the small successes, but turning a blind eye to the greater things that he calls us to. So he says here the Pharisees neglected justice, neglected the poor, neglected the heart behind God's law. They went through the motions, they followed all the things they could, but they weren't living out the real commandment that the laws are put there for. To understand and know God in a different way, and to love your neighbor. They were careful to check off all the tenth of the herbs and all these things that they didn't have to do, but what mattered more was left behind. Luke 11:43, our second one. Woe to you, Pharisees, because you love the most important seats in the synagogues and the respectful greetings in the marketplaces. This one's easy. Ready? It's called infecting others. It's for you to repeat. Infecting others. Infecting others. Did I skip one? I did. I skipped one. This is pride. Pride. Like I didn't tell you the wrong one first. Pride. Pride. Good. The most respected teachers and elders sat in the very front row of the synagogue and they faced the congregation. If you visit old churches, like one I grew up in, there used to be chairs that were sitting on the sides, and everyone who was assisting with worship that day, they got to sit in the big tall chairs with the armrests, and it was like pointy, I think. So in this one, was Steve, Pastor Steve, and then next to it was Ryan, and then over here it was like the choir director, and they would all stand up and they'd go to the big pulpit thing and they'd be like, today's reading. You know what I'm talking about. But if you were to assist, you got to sit at the very front. That's opposite for us, because if you really like church, for some reason, we all sit as far away as we humanly can get from the very front of the stage. But this is this idea. These platforms, this is what he's calling out. Sitting at the very front, to be seen by others. It's the issue of pride. Of receiving these special honorary greetings in the marketplace because you're a Pharisee. I remember when I first started working at the Methodist Church here, and I was down doing something, and I remember people would come up to me and they would go, Brother Phil, and they would or Pastor Phil. It makes me really uncomfortable. I don't like that. Some people do like that. Deep down inside, I think there's some people who's like, it's doctor, or whatever it would be. My dad hates it. Dr. Harmon, he'd be like, it's just Eric, please. But this is the opposite. They want these special greetings in the marketplace for their position. I don't think many of us think about the fact that we may go to church or a Christian sometimes to get our affirmation from culture. I don't think people are looking at us like, oh, you're a Christian, well, woo, you are just high and mighty. We're a little bit of a turn. But this is what Jesus is aiming at. It's the affirmation from within. Because if we look at ourselves and our desire to be seen as better than, even within the church, that's pride. Well, I went to every Bible study last year. I know you didn't go because you're a heathen. You with me? The same sort of thing. Well, I volunteered for VBS and, I didn't see you there. You with me? When I preach, do I want to look as good as I can when I preach? Do members of worship teams try to sing the better than other people to get noticed? Is there a heart behind it in that way? These are the warnings of the second one for pride. Now the third one. 11:44. Woe to you, because you are like unmarked graves, which people walk over without knowing it. This is a weird one, isn't it? Woe to you, you're like an unmarked grave that people walk near. This one is infecting others. Now like you mean it. Infecting others. This takes a little bit of cultural stuff. You ready? Here we go. In Israel, tombs and limestone ossuaries, which are the containers where they would put bones, were painted whitewashed so that they were very bright white, so that they looked like these big white monuments and mausoleums. This is why we have a lot of very bright white stonework and gravestones, the kind of heritage of that. So every springtime before Passover, the community made sure they would go out to all the tombs and they would paint them as bright white once a year before Passover so that they could be easily seen through the year and avoided. This prevented people, if they were travelers, from accidentally stepping on them or getting too close to where a body is lying. Because if you touch or are too close to a dead body in Jewish culture, you become ritually unclean. So you paint the graves so that people don't become unclean by getting too close to it. You with me? Does this make sense? So let's put this all together. Like Numbers 19:16, if you touch a bone of a grave, you're made unclean for a week. There's where it comes from. Did you know that in 1846, there was a Hungarian doctor who tried to figure out why so many mothers and newborn infants were getting sick and dying after childbirth? This is a true story. So he studied 2 wards, one full of doctors and medical students, and the other one full of midwives. And what they discovered was that those in the cares of doctors and medical students were 5 times more likely to have an infection or die after giving birth from a child than the ones about the midwives. Interesting. It's like they didn't know about germ theory yet. So what they discovered was that doctors and students washed their hands in chlorine. When they would do that, the mortality rate started to drop. Because the students would go around and they would do cadavers. So they would explore bodies and dig into them and learn things, and then they'd be like, oh, this woman's giving birth, and they would just walk over with dead body on their hands, and they would assist with the delivery. Well, the midwives aren't touching dead bodies, so they discovered that if you wash your hands in chlorine, all of a sudden, germs, which they don't know about yet, something changes that keeps them from getting sick. They were accidentally infecting ones they were trying to help with. So this is what Jesus points out. He says, you're like an unmarked grave, Pharisees. The unsuspecting people are bumping into you. They get into your life, they touch you, you influence in some way, and by doing so, you actually corrupt them away. Your influence isn't spiritual. It's infecting. That make sense? You're like an unmarked grave. People bump into you, and you, by just being by them, you ruin something about it. A hypocrite will never make you holy. They don't help you walk in with God. They drag down, they corrupt. If influence from someone like that is going to defile, not improve. Be careful of people who are more interested in the public commendation than they are in their own personal character. This is the warning Jesus gives here. You have these other things, and it makes you like this infecting, horrible thing. You've missed the point. It's so gross. People will follow you thinking that's the way, and it's not. You with me? Now the passage turns a little bit here, and it goes into our experts of the law, but the same sort of thing is going to apply. 45 through 46. You ready? One of the experts of the law answers and says, "Teacher, when you say these things, you insult us also." And Jesus replied, "And you, experts of the law, woe to you, because you load people down with burdens that they hardly carry, and you yourself will not lift one finger to help them." This one is loading others down with rules. We'll just say rules and regulations. As one author explains here, when you read the Old Testament law, it doesn't actually cover everything. It's like there's a lot of gaps in the Old Testament law. So you can do one of two things when there's a gap in the law. You can try to fill in the gray areas by making more detailed lists and spelling out exactly what people could and couldn't do, or couldn't do and not in different various situations. Or you can give general principles for people to follow. Now the Pharisees and the lawyers gave very specific details about everything, and it made life very, very difficult. There's no more gray area. There's a rule for every single aspect of everything. To go back to here, to kosherize a microwave, do you know how you do it? You boil water, and you put the boiling water in the microwave, and then you turn the microwave on, and it spills the boiling water out, and that koscherizes the microwave. Same thing with like a countertop. If you have like ham and cheese on it, it's not kosher, right? So you can cover it with a tablecloth that is kosher, or you can pour boiling water on the countertop to sterilize. There's a rule for everything. You with me? This is what became. There's no more gray area. There's no more broad strokes of just the general heart behind the rule. This is what he's getting at. These religious, spiritual traditions and rules that were placed on the lives of people here. And there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. I just gave some examples. It's unlawful, though, for a Jewish person to work on the Sabbath. Anything that involved carrying a burden. So people go, what's a burden? So they were like, well, let's spell out what's a burden. And so they decided that, it was unlawful to carry a burden in your right hand or in your left hand or on your shoulder. Or, and it says, quoting here, but anyone who carries anything on the back of their hand, with their feet or their mouth, or with their hair is not a burden. So hands, holding, or shoulder, burden. Feet, back of hands, hair, mouth, no burden. You with me? So I don't think hair is much of a burden, but if you think about it, that means you could smoke a pipe as long as you only picked it up with your teeth, and then, because your mouth is what's holding the burden. You with me? You see how they get into these kind of strange things? You could wear a hat, because your head is not, your hands aren't carrying the burden, your head is. You can wear sandals because they're on your feet. That's not a burden. But what about eating? Then the question goes, well, what about eating? I gotta lift the spoon. Isn't that, I'm not using my hands to lift the spoon? So they said, okay, well, you can pick up water as long as it was not more water than you could fit inside of an eggshell. So if you could fit the water inside of an eggshell, that's not a burden. That's okay. So people would keep little handy eggshell-sized things to know how much water was not a burden. And as long as the food didn't weigh more than 1 fig, you could pick it up on the Sabbath. Do you see what I mean about how when you lose gray area, you get specificity. And this leads to loopholes. These are all just like loopholes to get in and out of things. You can get around it, not doing any of these things by doing this. So these leaders make these details that are very important. I think details are important. I think they're very important. This is why we here have bylaws. This is why we have, all these policies and procedures and things that are written and sent off so that there's rules for how to fire me. If you guys want to figure it out sometime, the bylaws are public. You can all get together. You can talk to Kim or anyone or Amy or Blake or you can go, hey, how do we fire Phil? And you can get together. The rules are in there. I think it's very important. So you have this playbook that they've written out of all these different things, but you lose this heart behind it. You see what I mean? As soon as you have, it's one, egg size, whatever. The idea is that you rest, like just demonstrated in Genesis, the idea of resting from work. When you start to figure out an eggshell or 1 fig, or I can put it on my hat or pick up a pipe with my mouth, do you see how you miss the point? There's no more broad strokes of the heart behind the reason. So he calls this out. Are you good with that? What he says for them is you bear this on them without wanting to bear it yourself. You give them these rules, but discover the loopholes that you can get around it. 47:51. Woe to you, because you build tombs for the prophets, and it was your ancestors that killed them. So you testify that you approve of what your ancestors did. They killed the prophets and you build their tombs. But because of this, God in his wisdom said, I will send them prophets and apostles, some of whom they will kill and others that they will persecute. Therefore, this generation will be held responsible for the blood of all the prophets that has been shed since the beginning of the world, from the blood of Abel to the blood of Zechariah, who was killed between the altar and the sanctuary. Yes, I tell you, this generation will be held responsible for it all. That was a wordy one. Here it is. Ready? Resisting God's messengers. There it is. The logic is kind of a little challenging to follow, so I tried to break it down a little bit. Here's what Jesus is essentially saying here, breaking it down. These ancestors of these people are the ones that killed the prophets. So if you read Old Testament prophets, a lot of times it doesn't end well for them, except for Jonah. He doesn't think it ends well, but he ends up alive at the end of his, which is better than a lot of prophets can say. So these religious leaders were patting themselves on the back in the present day because they had built monuments to all these former prophets. They had built things to remember them, but at the same time, rejecting the testimony those prophets came with. It's like they came with all these things, but they rejected the prophet. John came as a prophet. He was rejected. Remember, he says, "You brood of vipers, you don't even know why you're down here." And even worse, they're in the process in this moment of rejecting the greatest prophet. Jesus is in there present here. And so the only prophets they even admired were the ones that had passed. They were out of sight and out of mind. Hey, why would they really like the ones that were gone? Why the ones that were gone? It's a lot easier to admire dead Christians than attempt to imitate ones that can call you out on it. You see what I mean? People who can confront and challenge you still. These prophets were long gone. You can't argue with a dead prophet anymore. They memorialized it. But anyone new that challenged the belief was persecuted just like the old ones were. You see the logic he's getting at here? You persecuted, but you build monuments to them. Because they can't call you out anymore. They're not prophets anymore. The Pharisees and the scribes refused to listen to the testimony of their history and their own personal rejection of the prophets that had come before. And by doing so, they became false prophets. And of course, these lawyers believed that if they had been there, if they were the ones back in that day, they wouldn't have done the things their ancestors did. The lawyers now, like their forefathers, reject God's message and the messenger. We have to make sure our hearts are teachable and ready to be molded. It's easy to idolize stuff that's gone way before. It's hard to be challenged in the present. You with me? That's why I've kind of brought it up. The sermon I watched, I was like, this is a great sermon. And then I read the comment and I was like, I don't think that's right. And I dove. To ask Ashley, I was like sweating. I was like dripping off my nose reading things. And I was like, I think that guy's right. And it like ruined me because it challenged something that I believed wholeheartedly. And I'm like, I don't know how to make this make sense anymore. I don't know. You'll catch it next week. But it's hard for me to be challenged by something that can't argue back at me. You with me? Am I ready to be teachable? Same thing for us. You good? Last one. 52 to 54. Woe to you, experts of the law, because you have taken away the key to knowledge, and yourselves you have not entered, and you have hindered those who were entering. But when Jesus went outside, the Pharisees and the teachers of the law began to oppose him fiercely, to besiege him with questions, waiting to catch him in something that he might say. This one is hindering others from understanding God. The lawyers didn't help people learn God's word, what the meaning behind things were. They made it a lot harder for people to understand. This is what he's kind of aiming at here. And so for us, we have to make sure not only are we teachable, that we're willing to learn and grow and be taught, but are we willing to adapt to help others along in the same challenge? To be clear in what God says and how it's to be understood. And it's not just in the words that we say, but it's in the actions and how we live too. Does it make sense? It's the same response they have at the very end of this. So he calls them out as being, you're keeping people from learning because you're just blah, 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 blah. And then they have the same response at the end. They're like, we're going to get mad at you again, and we're going to try to trip you up. Because you're telling people what we're doing is that we're hindering them from understanding what you're saying. And so what we're going to do is we're going to continue to hinder people from understanding what you're saying. Do you see it just fly right over their head? They walk out and they're still angry. They try to trip him up. How dare he say these things? He's just a carpenter, right? How dare blah, 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 blah. Who does he think he is? Who does he think he is? This is our approach at the same. Are we willing to adapt, to learn, and be grown to help other people learn, adapt, and grow? Good? Good. I read an interesting phrase that originated in China. This is a story I'm going to tell you, and we're going to get there. You with me? Hang with me. We still use this phrase quite a bit today. It revolves around an orchestra that performed in a year-round capacity for an emperor. And it was a large group of musicians, several hundred participants. And it played all of the important events and the festivals and private concerts even for the emperor. And so it was a really big honor to be talented enough to be a member of this group. Lifetime career, generous salary. They toured around with the emperor, all this great stuff. One of the particular members of this large orchestra was an imposter. without a lot of musical training, had a political connection with the emperor that got him a seat in the flute section of the orchestra. And so whenever the orchestra would practice or perform, they just held their flute up. It was not an American, European style flute, but I don't know how to play an Asian style flute, so I'll just do this, because this is how you play a flute. He would just hold it up to perform and pretend to play. Just with me? Like how I play the flute. I just blow air over the top. I don't know how to do it. Well, suspicions begin to grow, and finally one day the emperor announced that each member of the orchestra would be coming to the imperial palace to perform a solo piece. Just to enjoy several days of music. The impostor that had faked their way through several seasons knew that in a matter of days they would be discovered, shamed because of what he had done, and more likely he would be executed. And when the day arrived for his solo, he pretended to be ill. And so the physicians of the court were dispatched and found nothing wrong with him and ordered him to keep his appointment. But when the hour to perform drew near, the man took his own life rather than to be exposed for the deception and his hypocrisy. And out of that tragic accident came the phrase, translated now into English, that we use often, which was refusing to face your music. He refused to face his music to play for the emperor. Now we use that today to still refer to someone who just can't handle the exposure and the accountability of what they're doing. He's not going to go face the music. Like Charlie, who was it? Ryan the other day got a crayon, bless her heart, and colored a crayon on the wall near a lot of us, and we discovered it. And I wish I could do it perfectly, but I was like, "Excuse me, Ryan. Hi. Did you color on the wall?" And she went, she didn't even want to look at it. It's like if you have a dog, the minute a dog is guilty. You're like, "Did you eat the steak that was on the counter?" And they're like, they're not facing the music. They don't want what they did in the moment was great. They're not ready to face what was coming. You're refusing to accept the evidence that something is a facade. It's a performance rather than genuine or real. You're not ready to face the music. And so in this very personal encounter with these people with Jesus, he exposes this, who they really are. And who they are not. They're just imitators of genuine spirituality. Hypocrites of the highest order. Who does Jesus think he is? This is the kind of how it wraps up. Who does he think he is? He was the emperor. He called them in to face their own music. And they did everything they could but listen. And the mirror of the story points back to ourselves here. Because it's easy to respond to convincing truth by resisting instead of repenting. It's really, really easy. Again, just to jump back to next week, I'm so excited. I could very much just say, I am never going to use this knowledge that I used because something about it crumbles a pillar I believed the story was about. But doing so would be wrong, right? Do you see what I mean? I've got to face the fact that I don't know what to do with that story anymore from Matthew. I have to really wrestle with that. It's easy for me to just resist and not change by it. Make me a hypocrite, right? It'd be a lot easier to not face that music. To admire people who can't challenge us on how we think or live. That's easy. To tell others to do things that we don't even do ourselves. That's easy. To value public condemnation rather than our own personal character change. That's easy. To applaud ourselves for our small successes while turning a blind eye to our big failures. That's easy. Focus on something external rather than something internal. Easy. For us today, there's a long battle of hypocrisy that we have to dig ourselves through to stay alert before God and others. Some of the Christians that I most openly admire battle their own transparency and honesty. It's the reason why so many pastors are friends with each other. It's like, because it's really easy to be as honest and truthful as you can with somebody else who struggles with the same thing. One of the most mature believers you'll read in the scriptures is Paul. And he writes that in the letter to Philippi, to the Philippian church, that he has not yet attained resurrection status. And as he says, I haven't really arrived into the fullness of God. A hypocrite will tell you they did it. They arrived. I did it. I'm all there. But Paul says, I haven't done it yet. And he goes on to say, I'm not perfect or mature. I'm not fully mature in Christ yet. I haven't arrived. I'm not as mature as I'd like to be. But I have to press on. I'll continue on this walk. That daily decision keeps you from going down the path of hypocrisy, of becoming a better hypocrite, instead of being a more dependent follower of Christ. You with me? Make the hard decisions. Let's pray.